Is no slouch himself, former Open Series champion with Burn, and a couple other top 8s with this deck as well.
What a round one.
It's a good one.
What a round one here for our Season 3 Invitational. Now, of course, there are so many things to talk about this weekend. We got Legacy, we've got Standard, we got a Flooded Strand being cracked. Takahashi going to get an island to kick things off. We've got a race here between Danny Jessup, Chris Van Meter, Ross Merriam. We got some great players in the house. Shaheen Surani, Gary Thompson, Reed Duke, Todd Anderson. It's going to be a good 3 days of magic.
Yes, looking forward to it.
Sensei's Divine Top is how Takahashi is going to start things off. Yost knows what he's up against right away. He'll sacrifice a Wooded Foothills. He's at 19 as well. And we're going to see how Burn lines up here. Now, Burn against Miracles, now, of course, you don't want Counterbalance plus Top to get in play. But let's say that Takahashi doesn't have that combination of cards. How do you feel about the matchup then?
I'm fine with it from the Burn side of the table. You know, they do have a lot of counter spells. Entreat's not a card that you have a great answer to, but most of their soft counters are pretty easy to play around. If they establish the lock early, very hard to do very much, but if they're just sitting there spinning their top or trying to beat you off of blind Counterbalance reveals, a savvy Burn player can get that done.
It's a Goblin Guide. That's how Yost is going to start things off. We will see if this does resolve. Takahashi does have a copy of Force of Will in hand. Goblin Guide's in. There will be a trigger. Top card is a Plains. That'll be going to the grip for Takahashi. He's going to go down to 17. Takahashi will untap. He actually has Force of Will plus blue card, but to me, if he's not countering the Goblin Guide, he probably has an answer to the card.
There's only so many creatures in the Burn deck, so it's very important to have your answers lined up the right way. It looks like Takahashi does not have Swords of Plowshares currently, but you need to make sure you have counter spells to answer cards like Fire Blast and use your creature removal or blockers to handle the creatures.
The draw for the turn was a copy of Counterbalance. Very powerful draw. There is a Flooded Strand. Takahashi will sacrifice that. He's down to 16. We will likely have an island on the way. You want to search up basics in this matchup because you don't want to really open yourself up to Price of Progress.
Avoid it at all costs. The Miracles player, you don't want to be in a position where you get down to 4 or 5, you have the lock in play, but every draw step is very dangerous. So preserving your life total by fetching basics, very important, even if it comes at you playing your spells a little less efficiently.
We oftentimes call Counterbalance plus Sensei's Divine Top a soft lock, but in this matchup, it feels a lot more like a hard lock.
It's challenging to beat. You know, you do have some 2s and 3s in the deck, things like Rift Bolt and Price of Progress and so forth. Fire Blast is not the easiest card for them to answer. It's typically only Terminus that lines up there. But again, the Miracles player is playing with other counter spells like Force of Will. You see Spell Pierce, sometimes actual counter spell in the deck. So it's not like Takahashi is leaning exclusively on this to beat Austin. He's going to lock out the 1-cost spells this way and try to beat the leftovers with his counter spells and his removal.
This will be an attempt at Eidolon of the Great Revel. A multi-format all-star.
Yes. Very important for Takahashi to counter this card because a lot of his sequencing here is going to involve threatening to put Sensei's Divining Top on top of the deck to counter all 1-mana spells. If Eidolon the Great Revel enters play, that sequence becomes a lot harder because recasting the Divining Top is 2 points of damage.
Looks like the Eidolon is still in the stack. I think Takahashi is considering the Force of Will here, removing Force of Will. Now, his hand, not very good. He's got lands and a Terminus, and we know what he's drawing, which is Force of Will.
Yeah. Now, having the soft lock in play is worth a lot against Burn. And Austin's going to have a lot of dead draws over the course of the game, but he's not dead just yet. Especially if Austin is able to chain together a bunch of cards like Rift Bolt, Fire Blast, whatever Burn spells he has that cost 2 or more mana.
Takahashi taking a look at the top 3 cards of Sensei's Divining Top on the upkeep. That Force of Will, as I mentioned, a Flooded Strand and a Sensei's Divining Top. Trying to figure out what his draw step will be.
And Takahashi just might need to shuffle at this point. The draw that he would really like to find is Swords to Plowshares. Once he's got a little bit of breathing space from Goblin Guide hits, then it's very easy for him to line up his counter spells against whatever few Burn spells Austin can resolve for the remainder of the game.
Basic Plains, Sensei's Divining Top. We're heading back Yost's way. Bloodstained Mire the draw here for Austin.
Now, a second Divining Top is not without value for Takahashi in this spot. Austin can get into spots where he builds up a hand of multiple 1-mana spells, casts 1, and in response to Top trying to go on top of the deck, can fire off other 1-mana spells. So every Divining Top ensures him from that sequence from Austin.
Bloodstained Mire is land number 3. Gonna be difficult right now for Austin to resolve some spells. We'll see how he wants to sequence things. As you mentioned, former Open Series champion with Burn, so This is not new to him.
And if he plays the deck a lot on Magic Online, and I know Yost is very active, you run into Miracles a fair bit on Magic Online. He knows this matchup.
Yost will sacrifice that Mire, get another mountain out of his deck.
But you're starting to see a little bit of what I was alluding to before. Takahashi has the lock in play, and that's very good for him. He may go on to win this game, but it's not like Austin is just beat by turn 1 Divining Top into turn 2 Calendar Balance, even with Takahashi being on the play.
Just the main phase, Rift Bolt right now. 3 mana, target you.
Really bad to suspend this card against Miracles because they have a lot of agency over the top of their deck. They can shuffle their deck multiple times. You don't want them to find a 3. So with him only having a Plains up, you don't have to worry about something like Spell Pierce. And you're basically demanding that he finds a 3-mana spell in the top 3 cards. Not very likely for this deck.
No 3-mana spell in the top 3 here. A Brainstorm, a Scalding Tarn, and a Force of Will. And it looks like Takahashi has some interest in drawing Brainstorm, man. Really hard to argue with that.
It's the most powerful card in the deck, besides Sensei's Dividing Top. And I think Takahashi here needs some clean looks. He needs to find other stuff, Swords to Plowshares, or just a better spread of mana costs among the top 3 cards in his deck. Then he can start locking out larger and larger swaths of Yost's list.
Rift Bolt does resolve. It appears that Brainstorm will be the draw.
Now, the Brainstorm does a couple good things here. Takahashi can put Terminus on top of the deck, draw it at instant speed next turn, and kill the Goblin Guide. He can also now float the Terminus, which locks out Fire Blast.
Which is nice.
Which is nice. It's a hard card for him to answer.
Now, during the pregame show, when we talked about the Legacy portion, we thought that Omnitel was going to be a major player here, and that's part of the reason you see a main deck copy of Pyroblast.
Pretty common in Miracles lists. You know, you have a lot of ability to shuffle cards out of your deck, put things that are situational back on top and so forth. And Pyroblast is so efficient that you see 1, sometimes even 2 copies hanging out in the main deck. Only 1 for Takahashi in the main this weekend.
Something that Joe Lissette popularized with his build of Miracles over the years. Takahashi incorporating that, figuring out what he wants to put back with the Brainstorm. Looks like at least Terminus is going back. Brainstorm is done resolving. And you get a Flooded Strand, able to shuffle with top, which is nice, pass the turn back. There is a cost there. A little bit of life, which does matter when you're playing its burn.
Yeah, every point's significant.
Now, if you're a Yost, and given his knowledge of burn, he knows just how important Fire Blast is in this matchup.
Yes.
Top's going to draw a card. Terminus will be revealed. That's going to put Goblin Guide to the bottom.
But given Austin's state of affairs here, it's not the end of the world that he got rid of a Terminus this way.
There's another Bloodstained Mire past the turn back.
As he does not want Takahashi floating a 6 to lock out Fire Blast. It's one of Austin's best, most reliable ways to steal this game from this position.
Sensei's Divining Top is the draw. We know that. Now we find out what comes next. A Grand Prix champion with Miracles is in a bit of a sticky situation here, though he's working his way through it.
He's in a good position. I would describe it as a favorable position, but he by no means has this game locked up.
You know, what's interesting about this draw, too, is that, you know, you take a look at Takahashi's hand, the card he's seen with Sensei's Divine Top, hasn't really drawn particularly well. You know, he's got a Pyroblast in hand, for example, but it really does show the power of Sensei's Divine Top plus Counterbalance.
Yes. I mean, you know, Austin kind of needs to speed up things once this combination of cards gets into play because he just has so many bad draw steps from here.
There's that top again. Takahashi will pass the turn back. Yost looks like he's going to sacrifice a Bloodstained Mire, and he will. But now it's this kind of weird game of picking your spots as best you can with the spells because you don't know what's on top of your opponent's library.
Yep.
Don't have a great idea what's in your opponent's hand. So how do you fire off?
This is a very light sequencing error from Yost, but it is one. If you're going to break your fetch lands like this, you want to do it in your own upkeep. In the event that Takahashi has something like Snapcaster Mage or Vendilion Click and you have Searing Blaze, then you're actually doing it with landfall.
Sure.
It's no different. It just enables landfall on your own turn. And every point matters.
In this matchup, every point matters.
Every point matters.
Goblin Guide the draw. That's a 1-mana spell. That's unlikely.
Now, the hope for Austin to do something with these 1-mana spells is if he draws a bunch of lightning bolts, instant speed cards. The problem right now he has Chain Lightning and he has Goblin Guide. Those are all sorcery speed, so he can't cobble together a sequence where he overwhelms Takahashi's ability to put Sensei's Divining Top back on top of his own deck. So for the time being, these 1-mana spells are stranded. You can bluff in this spot and open up with a 1-mana spell, hoping that Takahashi will not respond with the counterbalance, with the Sensei's Divining Top. But because he has 2 of them in play, that's very unlikely.
Takahashi is going to spin his top. Terminus amongst those cards, which you look at the board and you see that it's empty, but in reality, that's pretty bad news.
Well, Takahashi is, he would like to find something proactive here or something a little bit more powerful, but he'll take Terminus. A 6-mana spell on top of his deck is very nice for locking out Fire Blast from the other side of the table. The thing is, Takahashi's not really in a rush to act right now. There's some argument, well, you shuffle and you look for a better set of cards. As long as Austin's not doing anything, Takahashi can kind of let the game proceed like this. His draw steps are better on average, and he has Sensei's Divining Top in play. So even though it doesn't look like a good spot for Terminus, I would be surprised if he shuffled this away.
Yeah, it doesn't want to draw it, of course.
Yeah.
But, floating it in there and having to worry about Fire Blast, I think that's the top priority right now. But it looks as though he will shuffle it away. It feels as though he can do better.
Fair enough.
I defer to him and his expertise.
Yeah. No, With Austin saying go here, it just seems to me the most likely scenario is his hand's got a mixture of 1-mana spells and maybe Fire Blast, maybe not.
Sure.
And if I'm in Takahashi's spot, I'm just very worried about Fire Blast resolving.
It's got to be the top card on the radar.
Yeah.
Without question. Now, as far as ways for Takahashi to win the game, and we have seen builds of this deck with Monastery Mentor, does not look like he's on that card this weekend.
No.
So he's got to get a little bit more grindy with cards like Jace the Mind Sculptor. He's got some Vendilion Clicks and a Venser. He's got some copies of Entreat. The nice thing about Mentor is that, boy, that card closes the game fast.
Yes. Can really speed things up. Though in this matchup, you would prefer to win through Entreat the Angels. It's a much faster clock, and it's a little bit more powerful against Searing Blaze.
Takahashi will draw. He wants his Jace. Remember, that was all at the end of Yost's turn.
Jace is also a pretty good way to win the matchup here, especially once Takahashi has Counterbalance plus Sensei's Divining Top in play. Again, Yost only has so many live draw steps. Most of his deck is either lands or 1-mana spells. So Jace Fate Sealing Yost and going Ultimate is a pretty stable way to win the game, and it totally evades Searing Blaze, which is a nice benefit.
There is the Mind Sculptor. So much recently if we talked about Jace Vryn's Prodigy, but we know who the real Jace is.
No, this is real Jace.
Yes. It is here, and we're going to see what he wants to do with it. Could be time to brainstorm, maybe a little Fate Seal.
Might be time for Austin to make a move here. Looks like he's going to stay put.
Dig through time among the cards that have been found here. You can really feel as though Takahashi's really starting to take control, and Yost has got to let it rip real soon.
Yeah, the reason that if Yost had something like Fire Blast there, I might have let it rip, is just because there's so many bad things that can happen from you from this spot. Takahashi finds a copy of Terminus and is floating a 6 on top of his deck, then you're locked out, or he finds Force of Will plus a blue card to pair with it. And again, Yost is running out of time here, especially because Takahashi can just pivot and start Fate Sealing Yost very soon, and Yost only has so many relevant cards he can potentially draw.
One thing to note there, Takahashi electing not to play land that turn. Might not be a major thing, but...
Well, if his only options are non-basic lands, he may not want Price of Progress to...
Yeah.
Because even if he fetches a land, he has to take a point off the fetch, and he has a Tundra in play. Suddenly, he's at 4. Now, Fire Blast, potentially other cards are lethal.
He's got 2 lands in hand. They're both non-basic, but he's got 2 lands in hand.
If he draws islands or plains, he'll put those into play. Those are free. But the fetch lands at 7 are a pretty major cost.
Looks like Yost is going to try to get something going here. 1 mana spell. Looks to be a goblin guy. Counterbalance is on the stack because Takahashi already knows how he set his deck. He put Pyroblast right on top. So 1 mana spells. We already knew they weren't good to go because there's 2 tops in play, but now they're really not good to go.
Very savvy play there from Takahashi. A lot of times Miracle players will say, okay, I've got Divining Top in play, I'll float something else on top of the deck. What the Burn player can do is try to resolve a 1 mana spell as information. Either you see the top card of their deck, or you know that they put Divining Top back on top, and then you can start blasting through with all of your 2 and 3 mana spells and Fire Blast. By leaving a 1 on top of the deck, you just end the sequence, and you still have Divining Top plus whatever's going on top of your deck.
Yost with Bloodstained Mire, he's just going to pass the turn back, so Takahashi's going to draw that copy of Pyroblast. He'll Brainstorm with Jace, pick up a couple of lands and a Terminus. Again, it's so weird to see Terminus matter a lot in this situation, but it does quite a bit because you got to believe he's going to be floating that on top now.
And now I think Takahashi is getting to a spot with a Terminus on top, plus Force of Will, plus blue card, where he can start Fate Sealing Yost very soon.
Yep. And he'll pass the turn back. Again, refusal to play a land. One of those lands is even a Scalding Tarn, but he doesn't want to sacrifice that.
Exactly. He did. Right now, Price of Progress is something that Takahashi does not have to concern himself with. It drops him down to 5, which doesn't really change the calculus on very much. Most of the bolts in the matchup are 1 mana, and so they're locked out anyway. But if he plays a fetch land and has to break that response to a Price of Progress, suddenly he's on 4. Also, he may not want to shuffle the top of his deck anymore. He might be happy with Terminus on top because it's locking out Fire Blast.
Yost will draw after getting a Mountain out of his deck. Now, one card that can actually play a role is something he just drew. He drew a copy of Riftbolt.
Riftbolt's not shabby.
For how powerful some of the burn spells are in this deck, Riftbolt actually costing 3 mana matters quite a bit right now.
And Yost can't go after the Jace in this spot.
No.
He's got Takahashi on the ropes a little bit in terms of life total.
He'll try a Chain Lightning. Takahashi, well, he knows what's on top of his deck. It's that Pyroblast again.
Given what happened the previous turn, I don't think there was a lot of value in opening up on a 1 mana spell, but it was also very low cost. If Takahashi's got the top of his deck set up the way that it seems he does, those 1 mana spells aren't doing anything anyway.
Is it time to try the Riftbolt? I like hard casting, not suspending.
Yeah, he's got to cast it au natural because you can't give a person with Divining Top in play a bunch of looks at finding a 3 on top of the deck. Austin also has the mana left over to play for Spell Pierce, which appears in Miracles list from time to time.
Dig Through Time, the first of many, I believe, this weekend. Yost is going to try to resolve Price of Progress now, too. Love the sequencing.
Yep.
He's giving himself the best chance to win right now.
Absolutely.
Now, can his Riftbolt get Spell Pierce now? Sure, it can, but as we've said many times, every damage matters right now.
Yep.
You got to try to get something through. So they'll organize the stack a little bit here. Riftbolt's what started this whole thing. Counterbalance triggers on the stack, as is Dig Through Time. And now Price of Progress is leading things off. So Takahashi has priority, and he'll decide what he wants to do in response to this Price of Progress. He knows the top of his deck. There's no 2 there.
Mm-hmm.
There's a Pyroblast, which we saw earlier in the turn. We know there's a Terminus there. That's a 6. And now what does he do? He'll take the 2 from Price of Progress. He's down to 5. Now he wants to resolve Dig Through Time. Will Yost let him? The answer is yes. 6 and 7. Entreat the Angels very quickly goes to Takahashi's hand. You see he's looking at a Ponder here as well. He's brought that one forward as though that might be a card he will take. Quick check on the number of Ponders that he's playing this weekend.
3.
Okay. A lot of players have moved that way to the Ponder build of this deck.
2 main deck counter spells as well,
Okay.
which is why you saw Takahashi not make a move with the Divining Top there in response to the Price of Progress. Wants to be able to resolve this Dig Through Time, have the mana left over to top, look for a counter spell, and be able to cast it should that need arise.
Looks like he might be taking Terminus here. And again, Terminus is such an interesting take in this situation because there's no creatures on the table, but he might work his way into a Brainstorm and then want to put it back.
Yeah, he has Jason play.
Yep.
So if he wants to, he can set anything that he's found here on top of the deck to get more utility out of his copy of Counterbalance.
Now he has spun the top. There's a Vendilion Click, a Brainstorm, another copy of Dig Through Time. But that Vendilion Click is timely. That is going to take care of the Rift Bolt.
And now Takahashi can pivot and kill very fast from the spot if he's taken Entreat. He also always has the option of starting to Fate Seal Yost. Now down to 1 card in hand, starts becoming very attractive.
It looked like he might go Brainstorming, but he's second-guessing himself a little bit. Now he will Brainstorm. Looks like he wants to put Entreat on back on top of the deck.
Yep.
Vendilion Click too. So put some 3s back on there. Be able to blank any further Rift Bolts, which are playing a little bit of a role in things right now.
It's one of the harder cards for Takahashi to line up with against with his Counterbalance.
Takahashi going to play a land for the turn, and now he's comfortable discarding and passing the turn back, setting up for a pretty large Entreat. Yost still holding on to that Fire Blast for dear life. All he can do is pass the turn back, however. Sensei's Divine Top will be activated. He will draw a card, and Treat the Angels is here. Takahashi knows the top card of his deck as well. And he wants to entreat for it looks like 3.
And Takahashi has kept himself at 5. That's critical here with 2 non-basic lands in play. There's no individual card in Austin's deck that can kill him from here.
Austin's going to start with Price of Progress. This would be for 4. We'll put him down to 1.
And something hanging out in Austin's list here. He has a main deck Barbarian Ring.
Oh.
So if he can get Takahashi down to 2 or 1, there's some hope of a real big punk out.
Force of Will. Takahashi's down to 4. That's a magic number.
It is.
This is Fire Blast. Is there a 6 up there? Counterbalance is on the stack. I don't think there's a 6 up there.
Oh!
And he gets it done. Austin Yost with some beautiful sequencing. He's got a bit of a smile. I would too. He is up a game right now.
Great sequencing.
Over Yuta Takahashi. Very nice game.
Yeah, Austin's pretty happy there. Get the guy to exactly 0, 7 cards in hand, Counterbalance plus top in play starting on turn number 2. A satisfying win. I would have taken a different path there than Takahashi that game. I think I would have gone very aggro with Jace Fate Sealing, with Dig Through Time and Force of Will back in hand to counter a big spell. Takahashi tried to build up a better hand there, and Austin was able to just barely sneak it through.
Barely cross the finish line.
Barely.
To the sideboards we're going to go. We will start with Takahashi and his 15 cards. What's he working with?
A copy of Disenchant, 2 copies of Aethersworn Canonist, a Rest in Peace, a Swords to Plowshares, 2 copies of Flusterstorm, a Venser Shaper Savant, a Blood Moon, a Pyroblast, a Pyroclasm, 2 copies of Red Elemental Blast, a Wear Tear, and a Grafdigger's Cage. So the obvious stars in this matchup, 2 copies of Flusterstorm, an additional copy of Swords to Plowshares can answer Yost early plays. You can also use Swords to Plowshares on your own Vendilion Clicks and Angel tokens to gain some life. You typically want to have some amount of Disenchant / Wear and Tear action. Sulfuric Vortex is very popular in the main deck or sideboard to burn. Sometimes these decks even have Curse Scroll for this kind of matchup. So having a little bit of artifact and enchantment removal is nice as well.
On the other side of things, Barbarian Ring numero dos in the sideboard. Along with 4 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Smash the Smithereens, 4 copies of Searing Blood, and I think a card that we're going to see coming immediately, 4 copies of Exquisite Firecraft.
When I first saw this card on the Magic Origins spoiler, I thought the most likely home for this would be the sideboard of Legacy Burn, because it helps so much in the Counterbalance matchup. If they're playing the bills that have Relic of Progenitus hanging out, they can make it a lot worse because they can affect your spell mastery. But Takahashi has no such thing going on in his list. It's not very hard for Austin to get a Miracles player down to 8. Even if they have an early lock, and Exquisite Firecraft can steal games. I mean, what you saw that sequence right there, if Exquisite Firecraft is involved, it's trivial for Yost to win that first game.
Yeah, as long as he draws one, life is easy. So these players are going to shuffle up here for game number 2. We will very quickly talk about Star City Games, the game night, very popular promotion. It's August, not a lot of days left to get our good friend Furious George.
Yeah, we're basically at the end of the line here for August. Every month we send out new pins and foil tokens. Stores have the flexibility to run this program however they want to. Just get players in your store on the regular for fun and friendly magic. The September kit is coming down the line. It's the Kraken. Too late to get signed up for this kit, but if you want to get signed up for the October kit, which is, after a long delay, the Hippopotamus, finally, head over to StarCityGames.com/game night for more information, or contact your Star City Games organized play representative.
Game night, very, very popular stuff. Hippo is finally here, just caving to our demands.
Finally. It only took close to 2 years of us complaining on the air about our bosses for us to get the Hippo token, but it's finally here.
It's not so much about how long it takes, it's just important that it happened.
Right.
Because now it is just proof that they will negotiate.
Just focus on the process.
That's
just
right.
Focus on the process.
Now we got what we want. Now we're coming for more. Looks like Takahashi is going to take a mulligan.
But mulligans are not too bad for Takahashi in this kind of matchup. It's not like his deck really trades 1-for-1. There's no counterspell overload going on this matchup. There's not a whole lot of discard spells. It's, can he establish the lock as soon as possible or get to a fast and treat? Those are his two paths. So he's just got to find specific hands.
In a way, it feels like, you know, I don't want to say he's playing as a combo deck, but he's not a deck right now, Takahashi, that's looking for card density.
Yeah, it's from the burn side of the table, it feels like you're playing in a combo matchup.
Yeah.
You're not at risk of dying really soon, but you are at risk of getting locked out of the game or very close to locked out of the game. It does affect how you sequence some spells. In a lot of matchups, you want to be able to go play a 1-drop, then play a 2-drop, then play a 3-drop, so you can try to overload someone's counter spells all in one turn with a flurry of 1-mana spells. Doesn't play like that in this matchup because your 1-mana spells have a very finite shelf life. So you often just overload on the 1-mana spells, try to get them out in front of Divining Top plus counterbalance, and then try to win the game with your 2 and 3 and 6-mana spells, shucking and jiving outside of their counterbalance, which is what you saw Yost able to do in the first game.
And that's what's so interesting about the first game that we just watched too, where Yost didn't even get the opportunity because he was on the draw to really even fire off with those 1-mana spells. You know, when you're playing against counterbalance, your goal typically is, all right, I got to get these Chain Lightnings and these Lava Spikes. Let's get these out of here.
Yep.
Because once he establishes the lock, it's so hard for me to do. And that makes that game 1 win so much more impressive that he didn't even get the opportunity to do that, and he was still able to overcome things.
Yeah, I mean, that took really good sequencing there from Yost. Takahashi drew pretty poorly there for a couple turns where if he finds one good draw step, it might be too much for Yost to overcome. For example, if he finds a copy of Counterspell, he's got 2 in the main deck, then he has all the time in the world to set up whatever he's trying to do. Because he only had a Force of Will and a blue card to hang on with, he felt he was compelled in that game from his position to play a little bit more aggressively. He was actively searching for cards. He was using Jace to brainstorm instead of Fate Sealing, and he just didn't have enough pieces at the end of the game to stop Yost's final flurry.
We're going to find out if Takahashi can find a hand that he is happy enough with, as Austin Yost is waiting here patiently. Heck of a way to kick off our Season 3 Invitational here. That is one of the best games of Legacy I've actually got the opportunity to watch.
Oh, that was really good.
A Scalding Tarn is where Takahashi will start things off. For Yost, he's got a 1-drop. The question is what it'll be. Again, he's got to get these 1-mana spells out of his hand very, very quickly. He will start with a Grim Lavamancer.
And there's a variety of matchups where, you know, you don't want to cast a 1-mana spell into Spell Pierce or Flusterstorm. You want to try to wait. It's a little bit different here. It's Grim Lavamancer, safe for Austin cast. But in this kind of matchup, I'm much happier about running Lava Spikes and Chain Lightnings into potential Spell Pierces early on in the game. A line of play I try to avoid against blue decks typically. Again, because you just need to do something with your 1-mana spells before they get locked out.
Swords of Plowshares is going to take care of the Lavamancer. Quite a few non-basics over there. And you do wonder, and I guess I'll ask you this, is this a matchup where you keep Pyroblast in? Or excuse me, Price of Progress.
It depends what you're trying to cut here. Austin probably got the 4 copies of Searing Blaze out of his deck pronto. That's an easy swap there with his 4 copies of Exquisite Firecraft. You know, it's not the ideal card, but you kind of had to keep it in.
Takahashi's going to target himself with the Dealing Click. Entreat the Angels going to the bottom deck. New card is coming to hand. He's coming across for 3. Yost is going to go down to 18. Yost, as you can see, is stuck on 1 land. Takahashi might make this even more difficult. It's a Jace the Mind Sculptor. Jace is going to tick on up. That card, you can keep that. What do you let him keep? It's like a copy of Lightning Bolt. Doesn't care too much about that.
Yost has got to use this red elemental blast on Jace before the game gets out of control.
Yeah. How do you feel about Red Blast in this matchup?
I'm not a fan of having it in the sideboard, period.
Okay.
I think it's fine for this matchup. The cards you care about the most are going to be blue ones.
Jace is here again. Let's see what it wants to do this time. It'll Brainstorm. A little Counterbalance, Misty Rainforest, and a Brainstorm here for Takahashi.
And this is a spot where Takahashi may have chosen to Fate Seal, but because he just saw a red elemental blast out of Yost, he wants to make sure he gets a little bit out of Jace in the event that it just dies.
Lava Spike the draw here for Yost. Probably have to kill Jace again.
And this spot, yeah, I'm not a fan of trying to contain Miracle's board for the most part, but Takahashi's on 5 cards this game, and Yost is on 1 land. He's got plenty of resources to work with. All you have to do is answer that Vendilion click eventually or race it. But if you allow Takahashi to go crazy with Jace, it might not matter even if you draw lands.
Lava Spike's going over there. Takahashi going to sacrifice Misty Rainforest. Looking to kill Jace with the 10-cent common. Shameful.
It's more expensive than that now, I think.
Might be up to $1. Maybe even 2. Doesn't matter. Flusterstorm will take care of that. Takahashi is going to Brainstorm now.
And that looks like a really, really juicy Brainstorm as he's found Flusterstorm and an Entreat. Gets to put the Entreat on top, has a Flusterstorm, and we might be going to game 3 real soon.
There is a Chain Lightning. Here's a Brainstorm. And how about a little Entreat action? We got Angel tokens.
Yeah, and 2 Angels with Austin at 15. That's a 2-turn clock, and very hard for Austin to answer. He's just going to give it up.
Yep. And that's completely reasonable. I don't think it's a great idea to try to play that out. You're just not going to win. You're not going to be able to overcome that. So, Yuta Takahashi is going to tie things up here against Austin Yost. We're getting ready for game 3.
And that was an easy win for Takahashi on 5 cards. It just goes to show you in this matchup, the Miracles player is closer to a combo deck than it plays in a lot of other matchups. Now, Takahashi can still try to do the 1-for-1 grind thing. He's got Flusterstorms, a couple other counter spells, but the bulk of his, where he gets his edge in the matchup is the power of the lock and how good Jace can be in certain spots. You saw how good Jace was there.
We're going to get ready here for game number 3. It looks like Takahashi's going to go back to the drawing board to touch. Maybe now that he's seen those red elemental blasts, maybe he cuts back a little bit on some blue cards.
Well, Vendilion Click is already a little bit shaky against Burn to begin with, so there's an argument there. I don't know how much sideboarding really gets informed by the red elemental blast because they're going to be kind of good in a lot of spots no matter what happens. But a card like Vendilion Click, which is already on the edge of being not very good against Burn, maybe that gets the boot for something else.
Fair enough. Takahashi does win game number 2, so Yost will be on the play for game number 3. Star City Games, it is August. We are doing our summer sale. We got new specials every single day. And today, we got some Commander action.
Yeah, all sorts of foils, legends, and other ancillary Commander products. 20% off. Go check it out right now.
Pretty simple stuff. New sale every single day starts at 11 a.m. This one will be going on until tomorrow, and we'll have a new sale for you tomorrow and on Sunday. StarCityGames.com for more information. Get 20% off those select Commander and casual singles as we do get ready here for game number 3 between Austin Yost and Yuta Takahashi. The Japanese player making a very long trip to do battle here in our Season 3 Invitational. I'll tell you what, it'd be pretty awesome to see him at the Players' Championship.
Would be great.
Add to what is already a star-studded field with Jacob Wilson, Jim Davis, Kevin Jones, Brad Nelson, and our Season 2 Invitational champion, Ali Antrazi.
Who, if I understand correctly, could not make it this weekend.
Unfortunately.
Couldn't defend the title.
Which made Tom Ross very happy.
Yep, still safe. Although I think that one's going to be really tough to touch.
I think it's going to be hard to go back-to-back. Tom did top 8 last weekend. Our Charlotte Open. with Infect before being dispatched by Hunter Nansen, which was a very fun matchup to watch. The match of the week in the Star City Games newsletter. So check that out if you haven't had the opportunity to. Merfolk versus Infect, of course, for Tom. And I got a feeling we'll see the boss some today. You feel that Infect is pretty well positioned in Legacy this weekend.
I like it. I think you can build it to beat Miracles, and it naturally is good against Miracles, and you can beat it to beat specific combo decks.
Both these players are happy with their 7. Yost is going to kick things off with a Grim Lavamancer. Wooded Foothills will search up a basic mountain. Takahashi with a basic island. He'll play that. The follow-up is a Sensei's Divine Top. It's a great place to start for Miracles.
Yes.
Now, one thing you can see in Yost's hands, he shuffles those cards back and forth. This is one of the few times where I am okay with white borders, because it lets me know he's got 2 copies of Red Elemental Blast in hand.
Good for him in the matchup, though. The concern here is that with Divining Top in play, it's possible Austin sits on these red blasts and Takahashi beats him with white cards.
Could certainly happen.
Yeah.
Brainstorm was the reveal to Goblin Guide, so that now be added to the group. We'll go Takahashi's way. He'll draw that Brainstorm.
It's very good for Yost to have a second creature, for example, because if Takahashi simply went Swords to Plowshares, your Grim Lavamancer, now you got some red blasts, I got Divining Top in play. Life's pretty good for Takahashi.
He'll search up a basic Plains here. So let's see what comes next here. Looks like he's going to fire off a copy of Brainstorm. I wonder if he'll aggressively counter this.
I would definitely counter here. He could be easily setting something up through the Divining Top here. You don't have to worry about him following up with, counterbalance because he's only got a Plains. Definitely worth fighting.
And if he's forcing back, he really wants that to resolve.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what Takahashi did. He forced a will back. He's going to put 2 cards back from Brainstorm. Had to pay a life to do it. Had to lose the Flusterstorm as well, but it appears to be worth it because now he can put Terminus and Entreat the Angels back on top of the deck.
This is really risky. If Takahashi's putting a land on top of the deck, he's expecting Austin to attack, get the Wasteland off the guide trigger, and then Terminus. Austin can simply say go. He does not have to make an attack here. It lets him get an activation out of the Lavamancer and potentially a second activation if he's able to empty out a bunch of his hand.
Here's Lava Spike. I'm curious, what you're saying makes a lot of sense if you're supposed to attack there or not. Because he could have really punished Takahashi there by not attacking.
If he's Force of Willing back on that Brainstorm with Divine Top and Plains in play, it's just got to be Terminus. Yep. That's really the only follow-up there.
He wants his free card, and then he wants a Terminus issue. There's Wasteland. Here's Sensei's Divine Top. Another top. Pass the turn back.
If I was Austin, I would not have made an attack the previous turn.
Here's another Lava Spike. Players want to make sure they've got the life totals correct here.
It matters a lot.
Yeah, it does. Got a couple of resolved Lava Spikes, a Grim Lavamancer activation. Looks like at least 1 fetch land, Force of Will. So they're going to sync it up. As every damage counts here for Austin Yost. Now, one card that Austin currently does have in his hand is Exquisite Firecraft.
Yeah.
Which is big.
Yeah. And, this is the spot you want to get into where Takahashi's taking some blows here. He doesn't have the lock set up. He's probably not going to Force of Will something like Chain Lightning, and then Firecraft can kill him even if he has counter spells left over.
Yep. Looks like they sorted it out. Takahashi down to 7. He'll spin the top. You can see Yost's hand, Firecraft and a Red Elemental Blast. Don't want to gloss over the inclusion of Wasteland here by Takahashi as well. Doesn't really play a very big role in this matchup, but you don't see that oftentimes in Miracles.
Yeah, 2 copies.
Here's Brainstorm. Now what gets interesting is how does Yost want to use his blast effect? Because you could make a argument of, I want to save my blast effect for counterbalance, for Jace, and potential Force of Wills. But man, Brainstorm's such a powerful card.
With Force of Will, with Exquisite Firecraft in Austin's hand, he probably just wants to use it to punch through a burn spell and not fight over Brainstorms.
Fire Blast was the draw. Now it's getting even more interesting.
Yep.
because I can see a world where Austin says float 2 red, fire away, with the intentions of this resolving, and then he just says, okay, I'll firecraft you and you die.
Yep.
But then his mana's a little messed up because he needs another land because of Red Blast, but he can simply wait.
Yeah, he doesn't have to rush. The problem is that because he doesn't have another mana left over, if Takahashi plays back, he can't resolve the Firecraft, and then he's down 2 mountains. So he's a long ways away from being able to play it.
Yep.
I think Austin's better served waiting for a 1-mana spell. If he punches that through, then the Firecraft just kills him, and you have Fire Blast at the ready in case, you know, the shields are down or there's a good window for it. So I like the patience. It looks like a spot where Yost could go for the kill, but with Red Blast and Firecraft in hand, his draw steps are very good right now.
There's an island past the turn back. Yost will draw. He found a copy of the Barbarian Ring. A little ways away from it, and it is a wasteland target.
Well, he's actually not that far away from it.
Fire Blast, sure.
Fire Blast is 2.
Yep. Checking for spell mastery. Yes, I have it. Brand new card for Magic Origins playing a role. And what's interesting about that in this situation is if you're Takahashi, all of a sudden you got to go, oh, I got to get a move on.
And what's so great about this is even if Takahashi has a Force of Will for Fire Blast, there's going to be enough cards in the graveyard most likely.
For the OB ring.
And then and Force of Will gets him to 2.
Yep.
And so we're looking at exact lethal again.
I think at some point you said every damage matters.
They all matter.
They all matter.
Force of Will's got a cost. One life's a lot.
Doesn't seem like much. Jace the Mind Sculptor, the draw here for Takahashi.
And Austin is thrilled to see this because he's got Fire Blast plus Red Blast plus Barbarian Ring. It's a really good setup. Takahashi's hand basically has to be perfect to be able to stop all this.
Fire Blast plus Red Blast plus Barbarian Ring. The knockout punch.
Yeah.
The 1, 2, 3.
With 2 Barbarian Rings and 4 exquisite Firecrafts, Yost has a lot going on for him in this kind of matchup.
He can play a longer game with that setup. Here's a Fate Seal. Top card's going to go to the bottom. Yost will untap and draw. It's a mountain. We're going to see him float 2 red.
He can float 2 plus Fire Blast. Then he can Red Blast the Jace. And then he has Threshold for Barbarian Ring, even if some nonsense happens.
Interesting to lead off with Red Blast in this way. I mean, maybe the thought process is I can clear the way a little bit. I think I would want to use Red Blast defensively in this situation to make sure that my Fire Blast resolves, but I also understand what he's trying to do here.
Yeah. I think this is going to work out fine for Austin no matter what. Takahashi's hand has to be essentially perfect to be able to stop all this.
Here is Fire Blast, target you, and that is going to do it. Austin Yost is going to win this match here over Yuta Takahashi, 2-1. Burn is kicking things off here in New Jersey with a W, taking down Miracles.
And, you know, it's the kind of matchup where a lot of people's perception is when Miracles has the lock that there's nothing Burn can do. There's no outs to it. But we don't get to see very skilled Burn players play on the other side of the table that frequently.